Okay, a little more on the intuition. Okay, the intuition of a hypothesis test. Hear my wife's phone going in the background. She's out watering. Doors are open. You might hear a motorcycle, a very loud motorcycle go by at some point. It's not my wife. So a little more on the intuition of a hypothesis test. The text, the authors actually do a very nice job of I guess it's 2.3.1, they mention court cases. And in particular, let's go with criminal cases, because suing, that kind of thing, is a little bit different. But when you think of court case, criminal case, what's the jury supposed to do? They're supposed to assume innocence. I guess something like that. Innocence. I could look it up, but you all can make fun of me if I've got it totally wrong there. So assume innocence unless proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. Okay, or a reasonable doubt, but I kind of like a shadow of a doubt. Okay, so notice assume innocence, all right? So H0 is the person is innocent. Okay, so we have innocent, and then so the alternative would be everything else. Well, it's pretty much guilty in this case. I guess if you're not innocent, you're guilty. So we have this H0 is innocent, HA is guilty, and then the idea is that the lawyers come in, they argue cases, and you begin by hearing their evidence. So and it's just the same thing with statistics, as data becomes evidence, and in a court case, the arguments along with physical evidence, the arguments are the data. Okay, and we look at that data and we say, and you're pretty much saying, well, okay, if the person is innocent, how likely could all of these things happen, all right? So if innocent, we start piling things up, right? What's the probability? So if innocent, how could the DNA get there, if there was DNA? DNA get there, right? You start saying, well, that's kind of weird, right? There's maybe that evidence. If innocent, how did they get, I don't know, let's go with stolen material, the stolen material. Something like that. Right? And all these things start adding up, and it makes, right, a smaller and smaller probability that if they were innocent, all of these things could happen, right? The more things Okay, so the more things piling up, the smaller the probability or likelihood, okay, or more importantly, what we call our p-value, the smaller the probability that all those things could happen. Okay, could happen with an innocent person, right? You're just going, huh. I have a big dog who's not happy. I'm not sure who she's barking at. Yeah, I'll have to wait a minute till they quit barking.
Yes, that's a big dog.
Yeah, oh, there's a big dog walking by, so.
Laura's trying to sleep.
Yeah. So, anyway, getting back to this, because the dogs know that dog's guilty. But this thing that kind of happens with, you know, doing this stuff at home. So, we're back at, believe it or not, we're back at, you know, these things are piling up. The smaller the probability that all those things could have happened with that person being innocent, right? You know, so that, oh wow, that, oh no, that couldn't have happened. The p-value, that probability just keeps getting smaller. And once it gets small enough, p-value small enough, we reject innocence, right? We say, no, couldn't have been, right? We reject H0, and we pick HA instead. Okay, now that doesn't mean, in either case, whatever we do, it doesn't mean we're right. Okay, so certainly, and that will lead us into, we'll have another video here, hopefully without so many dogs barking, but we'll have another video. They're still barking outside, by the way. So we'll have another video on this idea of error, but you see, it could be, even in the case of the evidence, right? There was some evidence, right? You kind of think they're guilty, but listening to the directions, listening to the rule of the law, you know, following the rules, you know, there's some evidence, but not enough. So, you know, you think, yeah, I'm going to have to vote not guilty if I'm on that jury or something like that, but I think the person did it, but I just can't in good conscience say that it's obvious the person did it. I just have this feeling, you know, from the little bit of evidence we have, but it's just, there's possibility it's not them, and so we say, oh, no, let's not put an innocent person in jail, and we'll kind of talk about that as well when we start talking about errors. You know, that would be a terrible thing, right? I think for most of us, we would feel putting an innocent person in jail would be much worse than allowing a guilty person to go free. And so, you know, that's something to also consider here. But we look at the evidence, we think they probably are guilty, but it's not enough, and so we go ahead and say, well, okay, we'll just have to go with innocence. Doesn't mean we really think they are, but that's what we have to go with. And on the other hand, definitely, as we've seen with some things like the Innocence Project and so forth, I'm guessing some very well-meaning jurors have convicted innocent people, but they had a lot of evidence. The probability seemed very, very small that that person could have been innocent, and as it turns out, they were. So that can happen as well. So just like in a jury, we'll have an assumption. H0 is our assumption, and in this case for juries and trials and so forth, it's innocence. We'll have an alternate hypothesis that usually our data is pointing toward, right? Okay, the person was seen at the crime or something like that, or they had access, they had a key or something like that. And so these are all things that evidence points toward that alternate hypothesis, but it might not be enough evidence. It might not be strong enough to whittle down that probability, that p-value, where we say, oh, if that H0 was really right, then the probability that all these other things happen is so small, we're going to choose to go with the alternate. Okay, so I think their example in the text in 2.3.1 of the court case and juries and that sort of thing is a very, very nice intuitive example for hypothesis tests and kind of what we're trying to do. So we'll call that good. Dogs barking and everything.